What's up, guys? Matt Parrino here for NewYorkUpstate.com, and I'm here with Kevin Bowen from 1070 The Fan in Indianapolis. He is the Indianapolis Colts beat writer, and he's joining me today to preview this week's game. The Bills are headed on the road to take on the Colts. Both teams under 500, looking to get back on track. It's going to be a fun one. Talk a little bit about how the Colts played against the Jets. What happened in that one?
Yeah, it was ugly from the start, to be honest with you. Drops have plagued this team for the last 3 weeks, and the Colts had 2 on the first 2 plays of the game, and their second drop led to a pick 6. And the Colts were down 7-0, 13 seconds into the game, and you were kind of playing uphill from there, and turnovers were a big issue. They had 4 for the game, and the Jets turned those into 20 points. The Colts did force a couple first-half turnovers, but they had to settle for field goals on both of those occasions. So it was just a lack of complementary football. The offense didn't do its part in the first half with the drops and the turnovers. And then when the offense got it together in the second half and started cutting into that lead, the defense couldn't get off the field. The Jets had 8 straight scoring drives at one point and didn't punt in the second half. So it was probably the worst we've seen the Colts this season in terms of trying to play complementary football.
Mm-hmm. You talk about complementary football, and it's something that the Bills have struggled with all season. Again, last week, the defense came out and perhaps had its best performance of the season, really shutting down a high-powered Houston Texans offense. Special teams, a couple mistakes there, a blocked punt, a muffed kick. The offense really couldn't get going, and then obviously national news, Nathan Peterman comes in and does it again, 2 interceptions. So some struggles, all across the board here. These are 2 teams that are struggling to figure things out. But I want to ask you, particular about the Colts, a lot of question marks were, surrounding this team entering the season around Andrew Luck, his return through 6 weeks. What's the report card look like? I mean, how has he done so far coming back from obviously being out of football for a while?
I've been very impressed by what we've seen from Andrew Luck. We actually, on our Monday morning show, we actually gave a grade for Luck after 6 weeks, and I gave him a B+, which I know some people might think is a little high for a 1-5 team right now. But, I mentioned earlier, Luck has fought through some drops. The Colts have had probably over 15 drops the last 3 weeks. His personnel has been really decimated on the offense. T.Y. Hilton has missed the past 2 games, and Jack Doyle, their starting tight end, has missed the past 3 or 4 games, and I don't think either are guaranteed to play on Sunday against the Bills. And last week was the first time all season Luck's had his starting left tackle, Anthony Costanzo, or his starting running back, Marlon Mack, for a full game this season. So considering what is around him, he still has been a career high in completion percentage. We've seen a variety of throws from him, and I don't think he's been the reason why the Colts are 1-5. I go back to the drops and just kind of an inability to maybe finish some games. The Colts have been in really all of their losses besides maybe the New England game. They had great chances against Cincinnati week 1, against Philly week 3, against Houston week 4. They had leads in the fourth quarter overtime of all 3 of those games. They just haven't been able to finish. But I think when you consider the lack of personnel, the injuries on the offense, and Andrew Luck missing football for 19, 20 months, I think he's had a pretty good start to the 2018 season.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. There's some similarities, obviously not in the quarterback position because you have an inexperienced group here with Nathan Peterman, Josh Allen. As we're filming this on Tuesday, reports are swirling that Josh Allen may be out for a few weeks. But I think the similarities are that these are 2 kind of skill position groups, whether it be, the running back position, over there, or maybe even the wide receiver position over here, that are just lacking some talent. So it's almost, if from a Bills fan perspective, you look over at what Indy's doing on offense, at least, the record's not really showcasing so much how successful they've been. But how is he doing this with this wide receiver group that seems to be very limited?
Yeah, that's why I go back to it. It's been pretty impressive what he's done. I mean, Hilton has been his go-to guy throughout his entire career and hasn't missed many games. And it seems like when the Colts were playing last year without Andrew Luck, they went with how T.Y. Hilton went. And for Hilton to miss the past couple games in this offense still to move the ball, I think that kind of goes off what I was saying earlier about Luck not being the issue. The Colts have thrown the ball a ton, more than any other team in the league. Their pass-run balance is very skewed towards the pass, something that Frank Reich wants to improve on. but I don't think they have a choice. They try to establish the run a little bit against the Jets. They struggled big time in the first half, found success in the second half, but at that point the Jets were pretty much playing the passes. They were up 2 or 3 scores throughout really the entire second half. So it's fallen on the shoulders of Andrew Luck. No pun intended there. He's on pace right now to shatter career highs in completions, attempts, but at the same time, he's still been a very efficient quarterback from a completion percentage standpoint, and that's given how many drops they have had. So it is interesting in the early prep I've done on the Bills to see just how they've really gotten no significant, consistent contributions in the passing game from any wideout. I think I saw none of their wideouts, tight ends, running backs have at least 200 receiving yards through the first 6 weeks, and there's nearly 100 players in the league that have at least 200 yards through the air here after 6 games. So both teams, I think, are similar in that. For the Colts, though, it's just mostly been injuries. Without Hilton and without Doyle, it is a group that's having to rely on Eric Ebron, who has had a nice 6-game stint here and joining the Colts in the offseason. But it's a lot of young guys and just a lot of guys that honestly don't look ready for life in the NFL.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you talk about how they've been able to, the struggles that they're having, and they're not really able to move the ball offensively. I mean, you saw it last week against Houston with a team with a very limited secondary, was getting kind of beat up the first few weeks of the season, and even there's glimpses, right? I mean, going into the season, the big knock on Josh Allen has been the accuracy, and you've seen that at times. I felt like last week he started to kind of make some strides during that game. There was one throw early on where he threw the ball at the guy's feet again. But as the game progressed, it seemed like he was kind of getting comfortable. But still, they're not scoring points, and they're not getting their receivers aren't getting separation. Now, I will say Zay Jones it seems like in his second season here, as this thing goes along, he's progressing quite a bit. Had a nice game last week, a touchdown pass from Nathan Peterman. But with Josh Allen out, I mean, Derek Anderson was brought in last week to be the veteran backup, kind of more of the mentor, but he might actually be thrust into playing this week because, I mean, if you're Sean McDermott, I don't know how you throw Nathan Peterman back out there. Yesterday at the press conference, he said that he's still confident in Nathan Peterman, just like he is all the football players in this team. I don't know really what else he would say. But, long term, I don't think you can, I mean, statistically speaking, Nathan Peterman is one of the worst quarterbacks in the history of the NFL. So it's hard to keep throwing him out in situations like that. But speaking of that, from a defensive perspective, obviously you look at the numbers, not great for the Indy defense. What's been going on that side of the ball for you guys, for the Colts?
Yeah, the defense actually played pretty well the first couple games of the season, but you kind of knew water was going to find its level, and it certainly has the past few weeks. And I tweeted out at the end of the Jets game on Sunday, the bad news for the Colts was, they were about to hit a 4-game losing streak, but the good news was that Nathan Peterman could be the starting quarterback against the Colts in Week 7. So that might cure some things for the defense. But Sam Darnold, they made him look extremely comfortable last Sunday. Darnold had been a guy hovering really right around a little bit below 50% as a passer the past 3 games coming into the Colts game. And he was 24 of 30, 80%. He had one kind of bad pick, but outside of that, the Jets got whatever they wanted through the air. And like I said, they had 8 straight scoring drives at one point. They only punted once all day. And I think that is kind of the Colts defense that I probably expected to see more of in 2018. They've had to rely on some playmaking that you just didn't know if it was going to be a consistent thing you could rely on week in and week out. They were actually like second in the league in sacks through the first quarter of the season. They forced some turnovers as well. Darius Leonard, their second-round pick, Will linebacker number 53, he leads the league in tackles, and he missed a game this season. He's been unbelievable. But outside of that, they just don't have a lot of, I think, Pro Bowl caliber guys on the defensive side of the ball. So they're going to play kind of a Tampa 2, kind of a very soft cover 2 zone. They won't bring a lot of pressure. But that's kind of how Matt Eberflus, their new defensive coordinator, wants to rely on things. They're going to play on effort, getting a bunch of hats to the ball, and they had success early in the season with that. But the last 3 weeks, Deshaun Watson, Tom Brady, and Sam Darnold have pretty much had their way with the Colts. So they haven't got anywhere near the same sort of defensive play throughout the first 6 games of the season that Buffalo has. Yes, early on in the year, it was more on the offense that cost the Colts games, but lately they just haven't gotten enough out of the defense to keep things, I think, manageable throughout a 60-minute game.
Mm-hmm. You bring up Darius Leonard, and that's actually my key matchup of this game is Darius Leonard versus Lesean McCoy. I think that the Bills, have to get Lesean McCoy more involved. He had 16 carries last week, but it's not enough because they're so limited at the wide receiver position. They're kind of, the play calling's been a little bit funky. I mean, they ran a screenplay to Charles Clay last week, and I think they only ran one other screen to Lesean McCoy. You got to get him involved. I mean, that was the big thing going into the season was that new offensive coordinator Brian Daboll is going to be able to mix things up, get creative with his looks, get his playmakers the ball in space, and you haven't seen a ton of that early on, and a frustrated Lesean McCoy early on. So obviously very interested to see Darius Leonard up close and personal. The headlines have been raving about him. But is there a matchup in this game that you mentioned looking into the Bills a bit that you're looking at that could be a key in this game?
Well, I would agree right there. Tackling Shady in space is definitely a key, I think, for the Colts, considering just the lack of playmakers Buffalo has at the skill spots. We know, kind of proven record, what Lesean McCoy can do. I know we didn't see him much last year in that Snow Bowl game between these two teams, but Darius Leonard has been really, I think, one of the major bright spots in the entire NFL. He's, I would say, the favorite to be the Defensive Rookie of the Year and has been a sideline-to-sideline guy and has been exactly what the Colts need as they undergo this new scheme on defense, going from a 3-4 to a 4-3. I'd say offensively, it's just kind of handling Buffalo's front. Colts fans will not enjoy seeing Jerry Hughes' name pop up, knowing that their former first-round pick continues to have, a productive career in Buffalo. And this Colts offensive line, while it has struggled in the run game aspect of things, they've done a really nice job pass protecting in the past couple of weeks. Despite, like I mentioned earlier, Anthony Costanzo, their durable veteran left tackle, missing the first 5 games, the Colts are a top 5 pass protecting unit. And that is, if you'd have told me at the start of the season the Colts would be that and be 1-5, I would have said that doesn't correlate at all. Mm-hmm. But that's the story of this team so far. They've gotten really good pass protection up front. They start 2 rookies, left guard Quentin Nelson, who went, a pick before Josh Allen back in April, and then Braden Smith, who was a early second-round pick, actually right after Darius Leonard, that the Colts took out of Auburn. He's been asked to play some right tackle, which is a little bit out of his natural position. He's more of a right guard. He started there the past couple of weeks, and while New England and the Jets don't have maybe elite edge rushers, he's really done a nice job. So I'll be interested to see if Buffalo maybe tries to scheme some things up and tries to, apply a little bit more pressure to the rookie out at right tackle. But that is a unit that, again, has protected really well. Credit Frank Reich and Andrew Luck as well. I think schematically they're getting the ball out a little bit quicker, and that's helped an offensive line that has dealt with some injuries.
Mm-hmm. Before I let you get out of here, Kevin, let's real quick fire. Let's run through our 3 keys to the game. I'll start it off. I think the first thing is, it's kind of cliche a little bit, but you have to maintain the aggressiveness from a defensive standpoint. We've seen it different times this season, especially early on against Baltimore, where, maybe the aggressiveness wasn't there from this defense. That's, for the last 8 quarters has been arguably the best defensive front in the NFL. I mean, they're dialing up the pressure every game from both sides of the ball. And I think what's interesting about this matchup this week is that you're going up against a guy, Andrew Luck, more of a pocket guy, a guy that could get out and rush, but he's going to hurt you more with his arm than a Deshaun Watson because of that dual threat situation. So it'll be interesting to see if they can kind of keep him in the pocket, dial up that pressure, and I think that's the key to the game is coming out aggressive early. What do you got for me for the first one?
Yeah, I would say the first one would be kind of the opposite. Make the Bills play from behind. The Colts have struggled in getting off to quick starts the past couple of weeks, and Buffalo kind of wants to settle into things on the road and rely on that defense to help out whoever is starting at quarterback. So I think it's paramount that the Colts get off to a better start and just try to establish some early momentum in a game when you're facing a Buffalo team that certainly has not shown any semblance of having the offensive firepower to turn this game into a sort of shootout type of feel. So if the Colts can get an early lead, I think that would be huge.
Mm-hmm. For me, number two, going back to what a lot of the guys on this team have been talking about for weeks, is the fundamentals, right? Not executing in the fundamentals of the game is what leads to these special teams gaffes, mistakes, pre-snap penalties, things that are just driving Sean McDermott nuts. On the road, if you can limit the mistakes with this defense, you'll likely be in the game. If you can get anything out of this offense, and that's the thing. But if you're not doing that, if you're not executing with the simple things that you can control, you're going to be out of it before this thing really gets going. So that's number two for me, is execute with these fundamentals.
Yeah, for me, number two, I'll go back to what I said earlier, tackling shady in space. When you look at Buffalo's skill group, nothing will probably keep you up at night too much, but LeSean McCoy can. And how the Colts want to play is, like I mentioned earlier, they want to kind of rush for, drop into zone looks, and they rely on coming up and making tackles in space. Early on in the year, they were a really, really sound tackling team, and I would assume the Bills want to have more of a focus of getting him involved. So I think it's paramount that guys like Anthony Walker, Darius Leonard, they're two young backers. Both of those guys make some plays in space. The Colts are dealing with some injuries at the safety position. So that is something that you have to watch as well, is kind of, breaking down and making sure the yards after catch or yards after a touch aren't too immense. So I think that's a big key for a defense that just could not get off the field against the Jets. The Jets really, yes, there were some drives the Indy defense was put into some unfavorable spots, but there are also some drives that were just too easy to move down the field. So I think tackling in space will be key, especially against shade.
I think from a play calling standpoint, you have to do your due diligence if you're Brian Daboll, Sean McDermott, to get Kelvin Benjamin going. This is a guy that struggled all season. You talked about it at the beginning. This wide receiver group is just not executing, not putting up any types of numbers. And I think that, while a lot of it's on Kelvin Benjamin and maybe he's not working as hard as he should be, or, whatever the case may be, I think if you're the offensive coordinator here, you have to do what you can do with this big, huge red zone target. Get him the ball, get him involved, get creative, however you can do it. And I think that changes the game if you get a couple of these guys, Benjamin, Charles, Clay, some confidence in the passing game early. And not only will help these playmakers, but it'll also help your quarterback, whoever that ends up being. If it's Nathan Peterman again, I mean, ooh, man, all bets are off. What do you got for me, number three?
And I remember last year in that Snow Bowl game how effective Benjamin was. Just kind of threw some jump balls to him, and the Bills were able to move down the field, even though that was one of the uglier games we'll ever see. Last one, and I hate to sound so elementary and so, high school pee-wee football, but catch the football. It is the storyline right now in Indianapolis with the Colts. Like I talked about earlier, 2 drops on the first 2 plays of the game against the Jets led to 7 points. They also had a drop in the red zone for an easy touchdown by rookie Nyheim Hines. That cost the Colts 4 points. So there's 11 points right there just on drops, and you ended up losing by 8 against the Jets. So against the Texans, against the Patriots, against the Jets, the last 3 weeks, all losses for the Colts. They've had probably over 15 drops, and it's been a multitude of players. Doesn't matter the skill group, running back, wide out, tight end. It has been something that has affected a lot of players. And I think right now, Frank Reich even talked about it earlier in the week, it might be a bit of a mental issue for this team. So that has been a reason why this offense has, been a little bit more stagnant and just hasn't produced at the level that I think it should be, with Andrew Luck playing pretty good football for you. So that to me is the third key, because if the Colts can do that, they should be able to move the ball even against, I think, one of the better defenses in the league.
Kevin, thanks so much for joining me. If you could real quick give a shout out, where can everybody find your work for this Sunday's game?
Yeah, thanks, Matt, for having me on. 1070thefan.com for the latest on the Colts, and then kbowen1070 on Twitter. And I look forward to seeing a matchup of 2 teams trying to get back on track before the midway point of the season.
Definitely, and we'll be in Indianapolis for all your Bills coverage this Sunday. Guys, for all of your Buffalo Bills content, as always, keep it locked on to nyup.com.